was in need or sick, she would drop her life for us, and that's what she did for me. Shalane had to keep a job down back in Boise so that we could have insurance. So Tuesday through Friday, my mom was with me, and then Shalane would come on the weekends and be with me. And she is definitely the second hero of this story. My wife Shalane, please stand up. This story really is about the great things that were done for me throughout this entire experience, but I will say, I guess, right off the bat, that it was really miserable at times. And I say this sometimes, and I included this in the book that I wrote about it, but there were times when I got so low and just so done with it that if I hadn't just been married, I probably would have preferred to die. Because I've never been afraid to die. I have a faith that I feel like I know what's going to happen after I die. And I was happy with my life to that point. I was only 23 years old. But because I had just married her, I had a great desire to live. And that's exactly what happened. Thank you, Shalane. And for the 5 children that we've had together. Thank you. All right. How do you start? Start this story down in Brazil, Fortaleza, Brazil, where I served a mission for the Mormon Church. Spent 2 years there. Yes, thank you. It's not as fun as it sounded yesterday from the class. If you were here for Rob's class and he made it sound all, like it was awesome because I was on the beaches. Yeah, when you're a missionary, you're in a white shirt and tie, and the beaches are forbidden. But it was so hot. I was right on the equator. It was so hot that I came home one night and I took off the tie, and I noticed that I had a tan line in the shape of a tie down. So it had gone through my shirt. It was about 116 degrees in the summer and about 115 degrees in the winter. No, there was a changing of seasons, which meant that it rained. That's it, because we were right on the equator. But the story really starts there because I think that's where I got sick. I think that's where all of this started. I really do. When I had 3 weeks left in my mission, we were in a house way out in the country, and I had a water supply that the city would just turn on the water actually once a day, and you'd fill up your canister of water for the day. And somehow we had a dead bird that wound up in there. And, he was decaying and dying, and we didn't drink that water, but I used it to do things such as brush my teeth. I got deathly sick. And here's a little side. I'm sure some of these details will be pointless to the story, but they're fun to me. The people in Brazil, they love teas. They believe that they have a tea that will cure everything. And so when this wonderful lady, when she heard that I was really sick, she came with her bag of magical teas for me to take, and she had a concoction that I had to sweat it out, and I am very claustrophobic, so she brought along a large man who trapped me under my sheets and gave me this tea that I was supposed to sweat it out, and all it did was just completely terrify me that I was being pinned under my sheets. But I finally got better, and I went home, and I had a lot of digestive issues and problems that would come and go. And then, of course, I got married to Shalane November of 1998 when I had been home for a year and a half. Wow. And we went to Boise for the summer, and that's when kind of really started to get sick. And I had all kinds of attacks and everything, and so we looked into what was going on for my mission, and I had a tropical disease, an extremely rare one, and we went down to the University of Utah Hospital. I left Shalane, it was going to be for 3 days, and she stayed back in Boise. I checked into the hospital, and the nurse brought me in for my 3-day treatment and put me into a room that kind of had a curtain, that you shared with some other patients. And she came in after a while, and she took me up to a new room, up on the 5th floor. The words hematology oncology. I didn't know what that meant. And they took me back to the corner suite. It was really nice. And I said, wow, thank you for the upgrade. And she said, oh yeah, people with your type of leukemia always get their own room. And I said, what? She goes, oh yeah, you have a bad kind of leukemia. And I see they're going to start chemotherapy tomorrow. And I said, no, I'm the parasite guy. That's me. I'm here for the 3-day treatment. And then she kind of followed up and she asked me some more questions, and she realized actually what she had done. She said, oh, you just drove here today, huh? Yeah, I'll be right back. And I was still sure that had to be some kind of mix-up with the charts. But then walked in a team of doctors. And they confirmed that I did have leukemia and that it was very serious. But because of the tropical disease, they had caught it actually before I had any symptoms, and it was only into 12% of my blood. So if they started chemotherapy really quickly, then they thought I had a 50-50 chance, because I was a data guy. I wanted numbers. I wanted stats and I wanted numbers right away. So the doctor, she finally got sick of all my questions, and she said, call it 50-50. And I said, okay. I lived in the hospital for these treatments, actually. I was there for 4 months and 1 day. And I went through 3 rounds of high-dose chemotherapy. And it's a great way to lose weight, I lost 35 pounds in 3 weeks and couldn't eat anything. And I shared some of this yesterday. As I look back on my life, those 4 months were precious times to me. And of course you can say that, I guess it's a lot easier to say that once you have, gotten over it, but those 4 months impacted me in a way that couldn't have happened, just through any other means. And I met a lot of other patients who had a huge impact on me and on the life that I wanted to live. And one of those, his name was Greg Johnston, who was from Vernal, Utah. And he was a cowboy. He came in, he was 6'4", 230 pounds. And I went in there to just say hi because, by this point I was excited for anybody that I could talk to and just kind of be with. And he was in the room right next door to me. And I still remember what he said. He goes, well, I don't know. I don't got time for this. I just like to get drunk and fight. Which I thought was an odd comment. And I said, well, Greg, you're not going to be doing either of those here in the hospital, let me tell you. And that was the last time that I saw Greg in that state. He lost a lot more weight than I did. And it seemed that everything went right for my treatments would go wrong for his. He couldn't even get the chemotherapy. He had a stroke and he had an aneurysm, and he would always go down to the ICU. And I began to kind of develop this survivor's remorse of sorts. And I would just pray and wish that I could give him some of my health that I was feeling. And each time that he would come back up, Greg would be a changed person. He would be a lot more meek, and he was focusing a lot on the past and what he wished that he had done with his life. He had been a part of I guess you'd call it, he had been a part of a car accident that had caused him to actually lose his daughter, not to death, but his daughter at that time was only 2 years old, and she first went into foster care, and then she was given to a family, and he had a lot of regrets over that, and he would share with me how he felt, and he would start to say things like, Derek, you're gonna live, and I want you to live for us both. And you gotta find my daughter and tell her how much I cared about her, and you're gonna do something great with your life. And those things, that was a conversation that was very uncomfortable to me for 2 reasons. One, this is someone that I had come very close to, and I didn't want to see him die. But secondarily, I just didn't like the notion that I needed to do something great with my life. I was a stutterer, and I still am, so when you hear some of those pauses, that's not a pause, that's just my way of stuttering. And so I had already known that I was going to become a programmer, and it was just going to be me and the computer, and I was going to put the headphones on and not have to talk to anybody and just write code. That was my dream job. And on really stressful days when we have back orders, it's still my dream job. So that was my profession. That was what I was going to do. And so I would say, no, Greg, and I would avoid the second question by saying, Greg, you're not going to die. You're going to live. And you don't need me to live for you because you're going to live. But we became very close, and and this was a football phenomenon that would happen every Monday night. Our nurses would keep track of our calories for us, and we would be at like 900 calories for the week. And then when we were watching Monday Night Football, for some reason, we could consume like 2,000 calories. And it was always Taco Bell, tacos, and Mentos. Packages of Mentos. That was Greg's doing. He loved Mentos. He'd go through them by the package, just going. And those were good times. Those were times that I will never forget. Finally, my treatments ended, and I went back to Boise. And if you were at the class yesterday, you saw a picture. I wish I could show you now, but it was the day that I went back to Chelan. October 18th, 1999 is a day that I will never forget. And I said yesterday, and I really mean this, that I strongly believe that we can only feel joy in our lives to the extent that we have felt pain and sadness and sorrow. And that when we go to those depths and when we have those lows, it really does, if we will allow it, raise the highs that we can feel. Because joy is more joyful when you can compare it to the opposite feeling. Health, just being healthy was a new feeling. It was a feeling, right? That hadn't been a feeling before. It's a feeling that we all get up every day, and for the most part we have it, right? We don't have a headache, we don't feel nauseous, we don't throw up after every meal. Health. Health had become a feeling to me that I loved. I loved to walk outside. I loved to feel the sun on my face for about 5 minutes, and then I would burn from the type of chemotherapy that I got. But the wind in my head, not my hair, I didn't have any hair then, and eating a hamburger was delicious, let me tell you. And that was 30 days of pure joy. And I went back to the hospital. And to kind of, I guess, go back to that contrast, I walked into the hospital for my first checkup. This was 30 days after. Walked in for my first checkup, and I broke out in hives from head to toe. It was the strangest things, these bumpy red hives. And I went to my doctor and said, Dr. Glenn, what is happening to me? And she was smart. She had been there a long time. And she said, I don't think you should worry about it. That's your body's way of saying it does not want to be back here. And it's true. I can still go back to the 5th floor of the hospital, which they now have moved actually, but I can go back and I can close my eyes and I can smell the plastic sheets. I can hear the jingle of the food cart, and I can have a flooding of emotions. And it's amazing, isn't it? When things have that much of an impact on us, that the brain stores that in a way that it can be triggered, and if we talk about other things, there can be things that have happened to us that are, that are either scary or that have caused trauma, that have their own triggers, and that's actually part of what we do at the foundation retreats. But this, for me, wasn't trauma necessarily. It was just a feeling of being nauseous, so I could hear the jingle of the food cart and I could get nauseous. And I was on the boat on the first day, and somebody asked if I had a patch, and I said I put my patch on back in 1999 and it's still on. Because I have never thrown up since chemotherapy treatments. That's just another little side detail, which is pointless. But I find it fascinating. Do you not?
Yes.
It's like the power of the mind or something. There's been times that I wanted to, but I like have this iron clank. It's like I'm not capable of it anymore. But I went back enough that I got into all the smocks and the gear and everything, and his parents were there. So I knew that it was close to the end. And I got down by his bed and I grabbed his hand and I said, "Greg, can you please come back up to the floor one more time for me?" And he looked at me back with a strong conviction and he squeezed my hand a lot stronger than I thought he could. Because at this point he weighed about 95 pounds. And he said, "Derek, it's all right. It's all right. But you are going to live for us both, and you're going to do something great." And this time he wanted an answer. And I told him that I would. And I told him that I would. It was the last time that I saw Greg, and he did pass away. And I sometimes forget this detail, so I'll actually just kind of throw it in now. I did find his daughter. I did find her. Not until she was 18 years old. I made actually several attempts, but it was a closed adoption, so I first sent a letter to the judge, and I sent a copy of the book that I had written, and I didn't know if she had received those things. And then the final Unified 25, the final that was at the cabin, of course, and I shared this story. At 24, we were driving home, and I was talking to Shalane, and she said, "Why don't we try to find her again, because now she's 18. She went home, and thanks to Younique and her incredible Facebook sleuthing skills, she found Morgan in 45 minutes. Yeah.
Woo!
And we brought Morgan Johnston. She had actually changed her last name to be his. We brought her up to the final Unified at the cabin, and she heard me tell that story for the 25th time. And we brought her up to the crowd, and I told her how much her dad loved her. And I think that helped her, and I do know that it made him happy, because I believe that our spirits live on. And I know that Greg has been proud of some of the things that I've done, and I wanted him to be proud of me, and I wanted to fulfill the promise that I had made to him. That was important to me. But again, I felt extremely limited. I thought, well, surely it has to be something software related, because that's all that I can do. That's it. Certainly not going to get up in front of a large gathering of women and do things like that. That was like way down on the list. So I actually started a software company, and but actually I want to go back in the story just a bit. I was jumping ahead. Where was I? Oh, I sidetracked to talk about Morgan. Yeah, so I got out of the hospital, and I got started with my career, and I became a computer programmer. It was awesome. Headphones on, and I listened to Enya for 8 hours while I wrote code. And I moved to Salt Lake when our first daughter was born, and I got a job at a company, in part because of my actual skills, but mostly because I played basketball. This was a small company that had like a rec league team, and so they had to recruit height for their team. That was an important part of the interview process for them. So I got the job. I started, and we had practice every day for 2 hours. We would go to the gym, and we would play. And this was years after I had gotten out of my treatments, and we were happy with our lives. We had a daughter again, like I said. But I would often think about the promise that I had made Greg, and kind of think about what I was doing to of course, try to fulfill on that promise. But this day, God kind of gave me a kick in the rear to get things kind of backheaded to a place where they should. And I had an accident. I jumped up in the air, and what helps you sort of see how this happened is the type of chemotherapy that I got makes your bones brittle. Nobody told me that before. So I came down on the top of somebody else's head with this part of my head, and I just felt dazed, and I looked at him, and I was checking on him, and he turned, and his eyes just got huge, and he was like, "Don't move." And they put me into like a human straitjacket, and they lowered me to the ground. And I was like, "What's going on?" And they, "Don't move, Max, you broke your eye socket." Broke your eye socket? I was like, huh? And I went to feel my face, and you know how you get that sensation if you don't feel a step that's there or something, and your brain is expecting something? Went to feel my face, and I had that sensation 3 times because my forehead was supposed to be here, but my hand went clear back here. And I did it 3 times, and I said, "What happened?" And he said, "You broke your eye socket, I told you." And they said, "Just lay here because we called an ambulance." And I got them all off me, and I got up, and at that point, it was easy to get them to kind of stay clear of me because they did not want to be near me. It was like, and because I felt fine, but to them, of course, the sinus cavity is hollow, you know? So it collapsed, and these bones right here that are the orbital bones, they also kind of broke and fell down. So I had this massive, like, just if somebody had just taken a chunk out of my head. Now, it didn't break the skin, there was no blood, so it looked worse. Probably be better, but it was like somebody had scooped a big chunk out of my head and the skin had stayed on. It looked hideous, and I found out later just how it looks, but I felt fine. I was like, "Come on, guys, let's go to the," and they're like, "Ah." And I go, "You, Dennis, you can drive me to the hospital." And he's like, "Okay." And of course, the other 8, they were like, "Well, I guess it's game on," you know, so they just kept on playing. I walked out of the gym, and there was a bunch of women on the cardio machines. I mean, it looked like I looked truly hideous, like a monster. And I know because I got to the car, I got into Dennis's car, and I pulled down the mirror. And then it really started to hurt bad after that. I go, "Dennis, get to the hospital." He goes, "I told you should have gone in an ambulance." And at that point, every bump, and poor Dennis. I mean, you just have to know Dennis too. He was like, and he driving. But there's no excuse for this behavior. He gets to the hospital, and he pulls up to the curb. "So you good then?" And I did. I walked into the ER by myself. Walked in there. There was one man with his arm in a sling at the very front, right? I caught his attention real fast. And he was just, and then I walked up, and the lady at the counter, she didn't even look up. "Please sign in, write your name," and then, she started to pat her chest. She goes, "Oh, heavens, just a second." And she ran in the back, and I heard her say this. She goes, "Doctor, come out here. There's a man, he looks like he got hit in the face with a hammer." And I heard the doctor say, "Well, he walked in, right? You can check him in." She goes, "No, please." And the doctor looked around. It was like a little wall, and he looked around, and this seasoned doctor from the ER, right? He had a little flinch in his eyes. He's, "Oh." And then he's like, "Well, he came in on his own, just kind of check him in." And so she very reluctantly took me through the whole thing, you know, asked for my insurance information, got my blood pressure. I'm sitting there, you know, I'm just looking at her. And it had started to swell. So it wasn't a dent anymore. It was just kind of this weird thing in my face. Couldn't see out of this eye, of course, because the eye was down here. And they got me back on the gurney, and they got me hooked up to morphine. That's nice. I don't know if you've ever done that. If you've ever had that power, and then, but they don't tell you. It only works every 10 minutes. You can push it all you want. It's not working anymore. And I know because I had to wait 4 hours. First they were giving me lots of attention, but this was right by the mountain, and there was 2 skiing accidents, trauma 1, people that were dying. So I could hear them out there, and I kept pushing the nurse light, and the nurse would come in and she'd say, "Mr. Maxfield, we know you are hurting. These people are dying." And the last time that she did, I said, "How do you know I'm not dying?" Because at this point, I would get up and I'd kind of see into this little mirror, and it was just getting bigger and yellower and purpler, and it was, and I was thinking, I'm bleeding all over my brain. I'm gonna die. And like after all this, you know, I'm gonna be just sitting around the gurney. But finally, they got me back for the scan, and this is exactly what the doctor said. He came into my room. I was lying down, and he goes, "Well, you broke your face." And he said, "But it's purely cosmetic." Cosmetic. Foreshadowing, people? No.
Yes.
I just thought of that one. That was right? Purely cosmetic. Those were his words. I felt very validated. I had just crushed my face in, sat there for 4 hours for the ER doctor, and he said, "It's purely cosmetic." And he said, "And we have a doctor right here on staff that's a specialist at this, but there's way too much swelling now. Come back on Wednesday." This was Friday. So I walked out the same way that I walked in. Went back home and I saw Shalane, and I couldn't wait because we had this ongoing joke about me getting a black eye. And she would always say, "Derek, you're never going to get in a fight. You're never going to get a black eye." I walked in. Huh? It was a black face. And I went to church on Sunday.
Oh.
I went to work on Monday and Tuesday because I did not want to use PTO. And my boss, who was the other head, saw me both. "Oh, just go home." So I was sent home, did not use time off on those days. Yeah. Wednesday came around and I went in for my surgery, and this is where the story finally starts to reach its point. And I still, you know, I was still, at this point, I was really enjoying the looks that I would get, you know, as I walked around. So I walked into the hospital by myself, you know, I'm checking in. "Hey, I'm here for my surgery." And they're like, "I'd say you are. Dr. Orlandi, right? The plastic surgeon?" "Yep, that's him. I'm here." And he takes me back for a consult, and he said, "As you know, this is a student hospital, so should we need to open you up, would it be all right if a student helped with the incision?" And I had so much respect for these students after the 4 months that I lived there, and I would see a fellow, is what they're called, they're like in their final year, take a 48-hour shift. I mean, they go through so much, so I said, absolutely. But I said, "But what do you mean by open me up?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, your damage appears to be fairly extensive." Thank you, you know, again, for the validation. And he said, "We're going to try to go in with some instruments through 2 little incisions right here, which I still have. But should that not work, then we're going to cut you from ear to ear and access the area." Yeah, access the area. And I said, wait, like cut me from ear to ear, then you're going to go in through there? He said, "Oh, no, we just kind of peel the skin back." And I said, "How do you do that?" He said, "Well, we have a fillet knife, just like a fish." Those were his words. "We have a fillet knife." Yeah, if anyone's seasick, I apologize. But hey, I'm on a roll. I'm giving more deets today than I've ever done. Right? What? Oh, yes. What's that? I've never looked over here. How do you all feel about that? I'm sorry. You know what? I think it's like trauma from only having one eye for so long. Thank you. Actually, now that you say that, I totally realize that. I apologize to every one of you on this side. Thank you. I love all of you. I forgot an important detail. I always forget this one. Yes, the guy with his arm in a sling. Do you remember him? After I had that exchange with the counter person, before she went back to the doctor, I turned around and he said, "You can go ahead of me." And I did. So I got there for the surgery, then I was getting lots of attention. And of course they did have to access the area. So you see my scar from ear to ear. Which if I could just stand to have long hair on the sides, I could cover it up, but I've always enjoyed cropped short sides. So there it is. It's bigger on this side, because this was the side with the damage, so they peeled this way. And I have about 28 screws made out of titanium and 7 plates right here in this part of my face. They put me all back together again. I came out of the surgery and Shalane saw me, and I think I have never given this small little detail too, but they had to catch all the blood, of course, so they had left in me this like snake tube. It was like a it was a drain. It was like a thick piece of gauze or something. I'm sure there's some nurses here that could tell me what it is. But it was just in there. It was. So she came in, tried to be so kind. She thought that was the finished product. Oh, she's gonna tell it.
I walked in there and he was swollen from the tube down. So what I see is, in my imagination, is they have removed his skull and put it back in the wrong place.
Oh.
Have you seen a mirror, honey? It was very terrifying.
First, I was sickly and pasty white and like 170 pounds for the first 2 years of our marriage. And then I had my skull put on in the wrong place. She was going to keep me too. Thank you. But the surgery went well, 5.5 hours. They had to go get more little special titanium screws during the surgery. But the whole point of the story and the moment that changed my life forever and was the seed to me finally being convinced that maybe I could do something great, that I could do something that didn't involve just me and the screen, was a precious 20 seconds that I had while I was coming out of the anesthesia. And I have to add this little detail because this is a miracle. And that is that the 5th floor where I had spent all my time and where I had spent so much time with my friend Greg, he was in a certain room. I think it was 523, but it might have been 522. But in those little rooms, they never brought patients that were not there to do the same thing as us and to have chemotherapy. But for whatever miracle, I was put into his room as I came out of post-op. And so I was coming out of the anesthesia, and I wasn't awake yet, but I was awake. I knew exactly where I was. I smelled the smells. I heard the sounds. I heard nurses that I knew. And so I knew where I was. I was back. I was back. Like my worst fears had come true. Somehow I was back there. And I was in Greg's room. And I was aware that he had died. And I was not aware of why I was there. And it was a feeling of sheer panic. It was panic. It was like, did I just imagine the last few years of my life? And then I remembered that we had a daughter. And I knew that I didn't have a daughter when I was going through cancer. And at this point, of course, my brain still wasn't processing everything correctly. But then, in an instant, I went to total clarity. And I heard a message that was meant just for me, and it was exactly, Derek. It's been years, and you're right back in the same place. and fundamentally, you're not any different. I wasn't doing bad things with my life. I was trying to do right by my family and by my faith, but I wasn't doing great things. And I was using the same excuse, the excuse of speech. And so in that moment, I had something just kind of well up in me that was, I didn't care. I didn't care if I stuttered in front of the whole world. I didn't care what I thought my own limitations were. I was going to try. I was going to try. And I was going to try to make God and Greg proud of my efforts. Because at that point, it really was just about me trying. And so it wasn't like I just left and everything changed, but it did in a way because my habits changed. I decided that I could get up earlier, so I got up at 4:45 and I started to work on some software that I'd been thinking about, but I was just saying that I didn't have time for it. And I did that for a year and a half, and I actually kept a journal of that whole time. And that was the software company that I started, NetSteps, in 2004. And I ran that business for 9 years, and I sold it in 2010. And I wanted that to be the great thing that I had done with my life. And it had changed, certainly, our lives. It was something great in terms of like the business world, right? But after I had sold that business, and it had only been about 6 months, I knew that it was not it, that it was not the thing that I could be proud of, and that I could tell Greg that I had fulfilled my promise to him. And I was driving home one day, and I was talking to Shalane, and I don't remember who we were talking about, but I remember that moment, because it was on like a car speaker, and I was talking to Shalane about somebody who had been sexually abused, and how much guilt and shame she took upon herself for those events. And I remember feeling so confused and angry, saying, that isn't fair. That doesn't make sense, and it's not fair. Why should she feel guilt for something that she didn't do? And I said, somebody should do something about that. And it was as if I could kind of cut the air with a knife, and I was back in the hospital, and I was with Greg, and I said, somebody should do something about that. And I knew that I was that somebody, and that I could be a voice for that cause. A voice that was a man, first of all, and that could give permission to so many women to heal for something that they didn't do. And we care both about the abuser and the survivor, we do. Because this is an epidemic that affects 25% of all of the girls that are born in this world. And that is an epidemic and a plague that needs a champion and needs a cause behind it. And that's what the company was started for. Long before we knew what products we would sell, and long before we found all of you, we knew about the foundation and the cause for which this company would be started. Now, of course, we feel just as equally strong about our mission, right? And that's for all women worldwide, right? And the foundation is the cause for which the company needed to succeed financially. And boy, has it. So thank you for all of your parts that you played in helping me fulfill that promise that I made to my friend, and for really doing something that has never been done, ever. A mission-based company, first of all, but the growth that we experienced from, call it January 2014 to the middle of 2015 is a growth period that, as far as I can tell, has never been equaled by either any other direct sales company or any other beauty company in the history of the world. And I always say, and it's true, it's because God didn't want those women to wait 5 more years, 7 more years, right? For them to have their chance to come to the Haven Retreat. To date, we have hosted around 600 women, is that right, Shalane?
Woo!
About 40-something retreats. 50-something, yeah. But it's not just the lives of those women, is it? It's what they go home to. I can share with you just a couple brief ones. A woman who sent us a message that, I'm sorry, she was on the boat, and she actually shared this with me herself. She was flying to the retreat, and her prayer was, God, just take me. She was ready for her life to be over because she felt broken. She felt like there was no more point in trying to get over it. And she came back from that retreat, and not just according to her, but according to her husband, a completely different person. Now, we know that 4 days isn't all the time that they need to heal, but it is time enough to take the burden off of their shoulders and to put it into a different perspective, right? Because often that's what happens. We have like a portion of our brain that stores trauma, and it's that same portion that just protects us, that just tells us there is a bear running behind me, right? I've got to run, or I have to breathe, just the most basic necessities of life. And our trauma is stored right inside of the limbic system. And it doesn't know the difference sometimes between that trauma and the trauma that we have today. And so to move that into the more logical part of our brain and to be able to get it out of the limbic system is something that they're taught in those first few days. And the sisterhood and the bond that they get with the other participants is something that I wish every single one of you could come and see. On Thursday afternoons, I get to go up there sometimes, and my wife goes there actually most retreats. And you see these women on the couch next to each other, like holding each other and laughing and crying together. And I will sometimes still fall for it. I'll say, wow, are you two like sisters, or like, did you come together? And they say, oh, no, I just met her on Monday. And they are sisters for life, a bond that can exist. They come in groups of 10, and we have gotten to the point where it's 3 groups of 10. So we host 30 women a week and 90 a month, every month. And that's something that I want all of you to be proud of for the part that So, not to be overly dramatic, but I do feel like I have finally kept my promise to my friend Greg.
Yes.
Thank you. And I did it by letting loose an army of women. So thank you for your part in that. And I hope that you feel empowered and that you feel uplifted in all of your own lives and the parts that you have in this wonderful, unique family and in the mission that we're taking to the world. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.